It's like lavender scented dog poop bags. I don't know why those exist. You just sort of start to associate the scent of lavender with doggy duty, which, very bad company for lavender to keep. Hey bees, I'm Marie from Humblebee Me, and welcome to a video I can scarcely believe I am making. This is the whoop-de-doo Humblebee Me is 10 years old celebration video. For those of you who don't know, Humblebee Me started 10 years ago now as just the blog, humblebeeandme.com, and then the YouTube channel came along about 5 years later. So this year is 5 years on YouTube and 10 years of Humblebee Me, and I have learned so much in the last decade, and a lot of what I learned was through making really bad stuff and learning from it. And so with this video, this 10-year celebration, I wanted to kind of go back and look at some of the most appalling things that I've ever made, things that never made it onto Humblebee Me, and kind of talk through what the idea was and what I learned. So this video is a bit of a tribute to learning by trial and error with a focus on the errors. I know nobody likes making awful things that they need to throw away, especially when you're super jazzed and optimistic about, the idea, and then you make it and But I do want to encourage you to go and make those mistakes. Just make them in small batches, because making mistakes, making awful stuff is a wonderful way to learn. And I hear from a lot of new formulators who are afraid to try something and have, a lot of questions. Well, what would happen if I did this? And what would happen if I used this instead of that? And I really want to encourage you to just try it, but try it in small batches. The not trying it in small batches is one of the mistakes that carries through most of the awful things we're going to be talking about today. In addition to learning through trial and error and a whole lot of research, I also learned a lot studying with Formula Botanica. I have 2 diplomas from them, a diploma in organic skincare formulation and a diploma in organic hair care formulation. So if you would like to read my reviews of those diplomas, I'll link to them in the description box below this video. Right now, Formula Botanica is offering an all new free natural formulation masterclass. So if you'd like to kind of test them out, see what they're like, see kind of how they teach and whatnot, you can sign up for that in the description box below as well. It's totally free and a good way to just kind of see what's going on. I have had a bit of a sneak peek of the masterclass and it does look really great. And without further ado, let's dive into some of just the worst things I've ever made. Awful creation number 1 was a baked sugar and salt scrub bar. Now, I have very clear memories of this being an inspired by Lush sort of thing, but I did just go check before filming to see if they sell anything like this, and even Googling searches to see if they ever sold anything like this, ever, and I don't think they did, which doesn't surprise me in hindsight because of how badly this turned out. The general idea here was that it would be a sugar scrub, but in a bar form, so that you could just kind of pick it up and scrub. So I mixed together a bunch of sugar and salt and some glycerin and some water into a gloppy paste, and then I figured, well, I need to dry this out, so obviously gloppy paste, not a bar. And I took a muffin tin and I put the little paper muffin liners in there, and then I poured the gloppy glop in it, and then I put it in a 200-degree Fahrenheit oven for what ended up being something like 4 hours. I didn't think it was going to take that long, but I checked after I don't know, half an hour or something, and it's still gloppy. So I figured it's a little longer. Yeah. And after quite a few hours, pulled that poor muffin tin out of the oven, let these no longer gloppy things cool, and oh my. So I never actually got to use these because they had become one with the muffin tin. I actually bent a knife trying to, a butter knife, not like a nice sharp danger knife, trying to kind of pry these, they just fused to the paper, and then the paper to the muffin tin. I had to soak these things for days to get them to just release from the muffin tin. They were so hard that if I had managed to get them out of the tin and use them as a body scrub, I think I would have needed first aid afterwards. We're talking a good amount of polysporin and quite a few bandages. These things, you could have potentially built fairly long-lived structure out of these scrub bars. As I was planning out this video, I was kind of going back and reflecting on like lessons learned from each of the things. And honestly, I kind of feel like the biggest lesson learned from this was that just like everything about it was a really bad idea. And also that you don't need anywhere close to that level of exfoliation. The next really awful thing I made, the idea was that it was supposed to be a moisturizing, rich body wash bar. And so the body wash part of it was ground up cold processed soap. So I just would like let a bar of cold processed soap age for a really long time and then chuck it in my food processor and basically just powder it. And then I was like, well, I want it to be richer. So I then melted the soap like in with some butters. It was probably shea butter, knowing what I had at the time. And then I was like, oh, it was gonna need to be hard though, because that's gonna be too soft. So let's add some beeswax. Right off the get-go, this bar was way softer than I had envisioned it being. I guess, I hadn't used enough beeswax. So I take it into the shower anyways to give it a try. And of course, in the warm shower, it gets even softer. Remember the washing experience being pretty mediocre, very low lather, just pretty like meh. But the worst part of it was that the soap had enough cleansing power to remove, like to rinse off the butters in the bar, but not enough to rinse off all of the beeswax. So my skin was so sticky afterwards that I ended up needing to re-suds myself up with just like straight soap probably like 2 or 3 times afterwards to get all this just like this coating of beeswax off of me. And then the bar itself was so sticky that I honestly think you could have used it as some kind of like putty style adhesive. Like it was just so gummy and tacky and gross. The big lesson learned with this formulation snafu is that beeswax is really not a good choice of hardener for rinse off products. You definitely want to be using something like cetyl alcohol, cetyl alcohol, stearic acid, blends of ingredients like that. Fatty thickeners, not true waxes, and yeah, beeswax just ooh. So yeah, if you've ever looked at a formulation for like a sugar scrub or a conditioner bar or something and thought, hey, I wonder if I could use beeswax instead, please don't. And this is how I learned that it's a bad idea. I also think that with this formulation, there's a pretty good chance that it would not have been shelf stable. I don't think there was enough soap in there to make it self-preserving, but fortunately it was so awful I threw it out well before I had a chance to see it, grow fuzzy. Up next is a lotion that turned into an essential oil cautionary tale. This lotion came about shortly-ish after I discovered New Directions Aromatics, and I was going through their essential oils, and back then, and I believe still now, they would list essential, you'd read the profile of essential oil, and then on the page there'd be like a blends well with list. And so I bought a ton of different essential oils, and then some of them weren't actually essential oils. Some were fragrance oils, and then some were like blended kind of quasi-essential oils because of conservation status. A little hazy on this detail. Anywho, bought a ton of them. They all showed up, and I was like, I can't wait to make, the most amazing smelling formulation with all of these expensive fragrant things that I just purchased, because New Directions says they all blend well together and all smell nice together. So first things, give them a smell. As I'm remembering, the ones that really stick out as like ugh, that I don't own anymore and will probably never own ever again were rosewood, sandalwood, and jasmine. Patchouli was also in there, but I do like patchouli, just not with those other essential oils. Kind of the first red flag was that I didn't like the smell of rosewood, sandalwood, or jasmine on their own. Not a fan, but was optimistically thinking that if I blended all of these oils that I didn't like the smell of together, they would smell better. The formulation I decided to bestow this essential oil gift upon was a 100-gram batch of a beeswax borax emulsion. These were the very first lotions that I ever made were beeswax borax emulsions. We made a 100-gram batch of this lotion, and then I just start adding the oils to it, kind of counting drops and blending as I go. Yuck. So I start adding extra different essential oils to it and just extra pungent yuck. But now there's so many lovely essential oils in there that I really feel like I can't throw it away because that would be wasteful. So I make a second 100-gram batch of beeswax borax emulsion and stir that into the first one. And now I have a slightly less potently stanky 200-gram batch of product. And now I really feel like I can't get rid of it because it has so many essential oils in it and so much like lotion. Like, ugh. I ended up forcing myself to use that entire batch of cream, and honestly, I feel like I can still kind of like taste it. Obviously, I was not like actually taste, but it smelled so bad that it was just kind of one of those scents that you tasted when you smelled it just like a decade later. Still. Lessons learned from that. 1, scents that you don't like don't typically improve with company from more scents that you don't like. So if you hate the way something smells, probably just move along rather than trying to kind of force it to work with other things. And this isn't just essential oils and fragrance oils. This is also worth considering with raw ingredients. So if you despise the smell of shea butter, don't try to just like smother it with smells that you like, or I guess other smells that you don't like. Things that smell gross don't smell better when you mix them with other things that smell gross. And if you mix them with things that you like the smell of, now you have the thing that smells nice combined with the smell that smells gross, and it kind of starts to ruin the thing that smells nice to you. It's like lavender scented dog poop bags. I don't know why those exist, because you just sort of start to associate the scent of lavender with doggy duty, which, very bad company for lavender to keep. Next lesson from that would be essential oil limits. There's absolutely no way that I was maintaining safe usage limits with this formulation. I'm very fortunate that I didn't sensitize myself to anything through forcing myself to use this whole batch. And then the last thing would be, if you are developing a new essential oil blend where you aren't sure, you're trying something new, just blend the essential oils on their own and do some wafting out of a bowl, out of a dish, rather than adding it to something, so that if you've blended it all together and you just go, that's horrendous, then you just get rid of that and you haven't ruined an entire batch of like lotion or soap or something. The next kind of funny thing that I made was a tinted body butter bar. The idea here, again, fairly simple. It's a body butter bar, I believe inspired by Lush again, that had enough kind of color in it for a bit of a tint. I'm a pretty pale person, and back a decade ago, I wanted to be a less pale person, and so I thought, this could be like a bit of a self-tanner bar sort of deal. I make a 100-gram batch of a body butter bar. I add iron oxides, presumably designed to sort of mimic some sort of a tan, probably like mostly brown, I don't fully remember, some titanium dioxide, and then a bunch of mica. And I basically just stir the oxides in, pour the bar into, I think it was a silicone muffin pan, and then just like leave that to set up. What ended up happening is that all the pigments, boop, settled out of the bar. So it kind of got a double-sided bar. Remember the first time I tried it, I was really disappointed. It's like, oh, like this isn't leaving any color. And then I flipped it over, and there all the color was, and it was basically leg lipstick. The fact that I am remembering this as leg lipstick makes me think there was probably quite a lot of red iron oxide in this bar. In addition to the pigmentation level being very uneven from the top of the bar to the bottom of the bar, it was also just very uneven where you did get pigment, because oxides are fairly clumpy, and I hadn't done anything I hadn't pre-ground them, I hadn't really thoroughly stirred them into anything. So you'd kind of apply it and it would be like mostly red with then like a streak of titanium dioxide through it. The lessons learned with my leg lipstick would be, make sure that you are really grinding up and evenly dispersing oxides and solid pigments. Make sure you are taking measures so that they don't settle out. So bringing the mixture to trace, letting it cool enough that the fatty bulk of it has gained enough viscosity to hold the oxides in place, evenly suspended throughout the bar so they don't go on you. Whatever the level of pigment was that ended up in the very bottom of the bar was way too much for body applications. And then also just making smaller batches. This is 100 grams of body butter is a lot of body butter, and 100 grams of completely accidental and pretty useless leg lipstick is a lot. And the last mistake I learned a lot from was a self-tanning lotion. The idea here was this was going to be an all-natural self-tanning lotion. I had recently got a bottle of buriti oil from New Directions Aromatics, and it was bright orange and very richly colored. I remember putting like one drop kind of on my forearm and trying to spread it out, and kind of just ending up with a very orange forearm. So I was like, oh, there is some promise here. Now, obviously I didn't want to just be Oompa-loompa neon orange, so I decided to counter that with some very strongly brewed coffee. But I don't drink coffee and I don't like coffee, so I just used instant coffee, like so much instant coffee powder. And I made a lotion, another beeswax borax emulsion, where the oil phase was buriti oil and the water phase was extraordinarily strong instant coffee. In my mind, this was a great idea because we had the orange from the buriti oil, and then it would be kind of tempered with the brown from the coffee, and that would get us like a tan color. And I would also smell like coffee, which seemed like a step up from the smell of most fake tanners. I make the lotion. I'm swatching it in the kitchen out of the blender, adding more coffee powder to kind of get the color to where I want it to be. Happy with it. Cover my legs in this new concoction of mine. I'm thinking, hey, like, that looks pretty good. It smells like coffee. Yum. And then I went outside and it was a dramatically different color in natural daylight. The buriti oil took over completely. The coffee is just like, I give up in natural light. And also it was extremely streaky. So I was very orange and very streaky, and oh, it was not good. In hindsight, it's definitely a blessing that it was that awful that, as soon as I went outside, I was just like, ah, because I went and I washed it all off. Because if I haven't, that absolutely would have like destroyed my sheets. Lessons learned on that one. Buriti oil and instant coffee do not make good fake tanner. And honestly, nothing that's really going to rub off of you makes good self-tanner, unless you were looking for a reason to buy new pants and new sheets and stuff. So those are 5 of the worst things that I've ever made. None of them are on Humblebee and Me. You're not going to find like a crossed out tutorial for a sugar scrub bar that's going to make you bleed. I really wanted to celebrate learning by messing up, by, you have an idea, a hypothesis, you execute said idea, and then you learn that said idea maybe had some flaws, and maybe the flaw was with the idea, maybe the flaw was with the execution, but you figure out where that flaw was and you are unlikely to forget that lesson. I would love to hear about some of the lessons that you have learned the hard way, some of the lessons that you've had to chuck in the bin or have perhaps forced yourself to use because you felt like it was just too expensive to throw away, even if it was really bad. Every formulator will have stories of horrible things that they made and mistakes that taught them a lot. And I think it's a really good idea to talk about them, to normalize this idea that not everything you are going to make is going to be fantastic, and that is okay. Just make your brilliant hypotheses in small batches so you can confirm their brilliance before you scale them up. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your support so much. A huge extra shout out, thank you, virtual hug to my wonderful patrons who are a huge part of the reason that I am able to create free formulation education content here on YouTube and over at humblebeeandme.com as my full-time job. So thank you so very much. The partner blog post for today is more of a retrospective, a look back on what has happened in the last year, collections of my favorite posts and formulations from the last year, things that have been, popular, things that I was really proud of, just all kinds of fun things. So head on over to Humblebee and Me and check that out if you want to. It's linked in the description box below this video too. I think that's enough for me today. I think I might just go swap this mug of tea in for a bit of celebratory champagne. Thank you again for everything. I feel so incredibly blessed that I get to share what I love with so many wonderful people. Just getting goosebumps thinking about it. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.